Are you guys aware there's like a pretty huge civil war going on all across America?
Oh, sure, but we just try to stay out.
After thoroughly absorbing the story of Alex Garland's Civil War, a compelling message continuously emerged, and once you recognize it, you begin to notice it in every scene. The film essentially places a beaming focus on desensitization, suggesting that desensitization stems from a disconnection to our humanity, and how this disconnection leads to severe consequences that exacerbate conflicts. Let's break it down by each element. The story basically oscillates between two extremes of high emotional states to low emotional states. We can first see this by understanding the interplay of our central characters. Our main protagonist, Lee, is characterized by her withdrawn and emotionally detached nature. We see this in many early scenes. We also see, as they journey, that her approach to photographing suffering also mirrors her withdrawn demeanor, with very little visibly affecting her. However, as the journey progresses and her bond with Jesse deepens, seeing her own past reflected in Jesse, suddenly it's almost like she woke up and she started regaining consciousness, and the reality of what's occurring around her gradually begins to take over and consume her during the next few carnage-filled days. We can see the detached state that she was originally in is now beginning to slowly crumble, but this change in emotional state becomes a power struggle because the more that Lee cares, the less that Jesse cares. Now Jesse's evolution is an equal opposite to Lee's. Jesse begins as a highly emotional, impulsive, and naive character. The gas station scene showing two tortured men showed us the stark difference in response between our two central characters. Jesse cries in shock and fear at the sight of a tortured person, humanizing them and feeling their pain, and Lee indifferently asks to take a photograph of the torturer with his victims. Then, as the film progresses, we see Jesse become gradually more numb to witnessing death, and Lee is now becoming more overwhelmed and distressed. Now that we have a general grasp of the two central characters, this leads us into the overarching message of the film. As mentioned earlier, the film is really driving the point forward about desensitization being a sign of our disconnection from humanity and how it leads to more brutal consequences in war. We can see this theme around detachment repeat throughout the film in its entirety. We've seen the central characters fluctuating between empathy and apathy, and this also reflects the seemingly inescapable desensitization observed among both participants and non-participants in the violence. You see, the portrayal of disconnection was embodied by all introduced characters, gradually lurking up across a spectrum. On the lower end, we had an indifferent shop owner, ramping up to the eerily casual sniper duo, and then to the emotionless gas station torturers, on to the highest spectrum of the cold, callous, mass executioner of civilians. All of these characters had one thing in common. They were all desensitized and disconnected from their humanity. Although the shop owner does not cause direct harm and chooses to stay out of it, her dismissal of the events occurring around her is still a sign of apathy and is still an indirect harm. The film brilliantly drives this point forward by using the interesting context of having the reporters who are risking their lives to ensure that these moments are documented, meeting a woman who refuses to take witness to their efforts, creating this awkward encounter between them. She may have a moral responsibility to remain informed, but she instead says directly to the press that she is choosing to remain ignorant, as they stare back at her dumbfounded. Her denial of her moral responsibility to remain informed can mirror the same emotions shown in the American soldier's denial of his moral responsibility to protect civilians and choosing to emotionally disconnect and executing them en masse. It's becoming more clear at this point what the film is trying to convey. It doesn't matter what the fight is about, we all still have a moral obligation and a role in times of crisis. Each are important and essential to mitigating the terror in some way, but severe consequences arise when we all collectively disconnect from our own humanity and respond through ignorance and desensitization and even the participation in violence. Nobody here is innocent, not even the main characters. A fantastic feature of this film is how the story was delivered to us through the vehicle of photography and journalism, later focusing the lens on us, the audience, for also displaying a disconnection. The film actually mimics the way that we would view a photograph. War photography tends to create a paradox where, on the one hand, when you first see a shocking image that displays the brutality of war, it can evoke a visceral and highly emotional reaction out of us, prompting us to want to look away, while also simultaneously causing us to want to separate ourselves and dehumanize those in the images. War journalism can create a paradox because it evokes those two completely different emotions at the same time, and this pattern actually mimics the film. The film captures that initial shock early in the story. When we saw the gas station scene, it's incredibly disturbing and you just want to look away, as you would with a photograph documenting suffering in war. However, as we keep watching the film, we are now gradually disconnecting from the fallout. People are still experiencing intense levels of brutality, but the film is no longer focusing on them or prioritizing them. Similar to the way that we would react to a graphic photo with initial shock and gradually with desensitization, we also started the film with initial shock and gradual desensitization. This theme is clearly highlighted by the treatment of the characters as well, particularly in how the film handles the death of our main protagonist, who we grew connected to. We went from memorializing and marinating in the deaths that we saw to having quick transitions with little focus on the character. The sudden transition from the most significant character's death to the next scene without pausing to memorialize the character was an intentional element to the film's conclusion. It read like a photograph. It exemplified the ongoing theme of desensitization. It highlighted how even we as the audience will react to repeated exposure of violence and how it dulls our emotional responses. This method of storytelling was used to mirror exactly how society often moves quickly past individual tragedies, despite how shocking, due to the overwhelming frequency of news and our seemingly inescapable desensitization. In conclusion, my interpretation of the overarching message of this film is beyond the surface issues. It doesn't discuss why they are fighting. It doesn't propagandize a certain side of politics or allude to a certain way of living. It simply focuses on human nature. It focuses on our moral responsibility to remain connected to our humanity despite who we are, what role we are in, and what we believe in. It emphasizes the ironic fragility of our humanity and how it seems so easily lost when everything around us seems to be crumbling. It shows the paradoxical way that we react to brutality and suffering. Ironically, in situations where we stand to lose everything, one might expect us to hold on more tightly to our humanity and dignity, qualities that inherently define us and cannot be taken away from us. Yet, often, it is in these very moments that we find ourselves so quickly disconnecting and letting go of our essential human attributes. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you did enjoy this analysis, please remember to subscribe and leave a comment down below of what other films you'd like me to analyze. Bye.